Hey guys, so I recently bought the most expensive riding gear I have ever bought. My Forma adventure boots. How expensive? They are proper expensive. Like feed a poor village 2 meals expensive. Open that fixed deposit your mother has been asking you to expensive. Buy that action camera expensive. To cut it short, more than my wallet would permit expensive. So let me take you on a journey of how I wanted to spend less, yet I ended up blowing all my budget on these boots. And I'll also tell you the things to look for when you're looking at buying a boot. What are the criteria you should measure them in? So your wish list would probably look like this. You want it to be cheap, protective, good looking, well built, weatherproof, and also comfortable. But let me break your bubble. This list doesn't go with cheap. So something that is cheap and good looking is probably not going to be comfortable or protective. It's probably just a boot masquerading as riding boots. They'll probably have fancy blingy stuff around which makes it look like a riding boot, but it's not. Stay away from them. I would advise you're better off buying riding boots which are weatherproof and comfortable, and you can walk in them if you really don't want to spend money. Next up, if it's cheap and protective, it's definitely not going to be comfortable. Weatherproof is far off, because the materials used to make a boot protective are inherently hard and stiff, and they don't make for a comfortable shoe unless the materials used are very expensive, right? So this combination definitely doesn't work. So you need to be first looking at what kind of riding you're going to be doing. For example, will you be riding in a lot of rain? If no, then you don't need a waterproof boot. Then you don't need to spend on expensive materials like Gore-Tex, because you don't need it every kilometer of your ride. Next, for example, if you're going to be riding mostly on highways and not much on off-roads, then you don't need a motocross boot just because you're a big CS Santosh fan. Motocross boots are usually really high and they have very rigid shells, which make them not very comfortable unless you're buying the very premium ones. So you'd rather stick to more sport touring boots, which are conducive for highway usage and are slightly cheaper also. So in terms of protection, what should you be looking at? First up, you definitely need toe reinforcements, because this is the part which is going to take the most of the beating in case of crash. Next are heel protectors, which reside around this part. They ensure that your ankle doesn't twist completely in case of a crash. After that are the ankle cups. They save your ankles from side impact. They are very important, and they are also the primary reason, if you have a very rigid frame around it, they are the primary reason why some boots are not very easy to walk, because the flex goes away. That's why you have to look at boots which have a webbing here which allows it to flex. Lastly is definitely the shin plate. It saves your leg from any flying debris that's coming from the bike in front, or even from your front tire if you're riding off-roads. Also, in case you have a fall and your leg gets stuck underneath the bike, the rigidity of this part is going to save your leg. So on my journey of looking for the perfect boot, I started from the 5,000 rupee mark, because the older Royal Enfield low boots that I was wearing was around that mark. While the boot was protective, but it was definitely not comfortable. Also, it wasn't weatherproof. It would not get wet very easily, but once it got wet, it would just not dry out. So I started from that mark and I realized there's not enough options. So I moved up a slab, so around the 7,000, 8,000 mark. So we have a few other brands which are not that well known. Then you have Mototech, who has recently launched their boots. Their boots are slightly better built compared to the 5,000 rupee ones, but again you won't find any weather protection, and the comfort in them is fairly minimal. Also, in terms of rigidity of the boot, they are either too stiff or they just feel like gum boots, and they don't breathe at all, and it's very important to be comfortable in a boot, because you're going to be riding it all day if you're touring on the highway. Lastly, the soles, they don't offer much traction. So if you're sticking to the road all the time, then it's good, but if you intend to go do some fire roads and trails, etc., it's difficult to keep your feet down when there's gravel on them, because they're kind of flat and they're not meant for that purpose. So even that 7,000 range wasn't enough. Next up is the 10,000 rupee boots. There are some much better than the 5,000 rupee boots in that range. But then if you think of it, you're spending 10,000 bucks. You don't want to buy a compromise for 10,000, right? Something which again doesn't have weatherproofing, has protection which is just about okay. Comfort, questionable. It depends on your kind of usage. And a lot of these are made to style like racing boots, which is stupid because hardly anyone is going to be using them for racing, right? For track days, you need really good protection. So these 4 racing boots have fake metal sliders on the side, and they have branding to make it look like you're ready for the track. And I was just not willing to spend 10,000 rupees on those. So I had to move up a level. That is when I started doing research on what I really wanted from a boot. Effectively, I tour a lot, and that involves going off the road also. So I would want my boots to have enough grip, and since I might unmount my bike and walk around a bit to get pictures or whatever, they should be comfortable enough so that I don't feel annoyed the moment I get off the bike and I have to walk in them. And I'm not even talking about protection. That's definitely a priority. I want my leg to be alive in case of a crash, or even if I drop my bike on it, or if some really big pebble comes flying and hits my leg. Considering all of this, I realized I needed an adventure touring boot and not a sport touring boot that would be slightly cheaper because of the grip factors and other stuff. Then I started looking at Alpine Star and TCX boots, which are breathable, which have Gore-Tex and mesh lining all over, and they are very comfortable. But because of all those panels which are very well breathable, they are not as rigid, so the protection takes a hit. While they are really good sport touring boots, they cost 20,000 rupees and the protection is not the best. It's always going to be a compromise. If you want the best of protection, you will not be able to make it breathe from all corners just because of the kind of materials you'll have to use. That is where I came across the Forma adventure boot. It does have a lining inside which is breathable as well as waterproof. It's not Gore-Tex. That would have definitely pushed the price even further, but they are almost as good as Gore-Tex, and I love the fitment of these. So these clips, because of the way they are positioned, they and you can also make them loose or tight. So you can choose on how much flex you get in terms of your ankle. Also, the shin protection is in place. I love the way it looks. There's a gear shifter pad here so that your boot doesn't get eroded quickly. And because of the way it's constructed, I don't think it's going to get the creases from where the boots fold, which was my primary problem with my last boot. It got cut from here very quickly because of the fold. Also the grip, it's amazing. It's a bit dirty, pardon me for that, because I've been using it a lot. The grip is amazing. It doesn't slide if you step on gravel, if you're doing off-roading where you have to constantly wade your bike through mud, etc. This is brilliant. And it's surprisingly not as hot as I expected. I really thought my feet are going to be baked because there are no vents here. It's just the inner lining inside which breathes as well as protects you from water. But unless you're standing in sunlight, if you keep moving all along, this doesn't really hurt as much. One more reason why I did not like the sport touring flat boots is because they would not stay as firmly planted on the foot pegs. Since we have regular foot pegs, we don't have the motocross foot pegs with teeth. If you're standing up and riding on bad roads, there's a tendency for sport touring boots to slip unless you get the heel really stuck on it. These boots, the adventure touring boots with grip at the bottom, are definitely worth it. One more reason why I was willing to spend 16,000 bucks on these is that buying a compromise for 10,000, I would have to either get another boot or I'd get frustrated with it in a year or two and again spend. I want to live with this boot for a while, which is why I decided to go ahead and spend it. I know I'm not really an expert on what to get and what not to get, but this was more or less my journey of buying the boot. I'm sure you guys would have more questions that I can answer. Definitely write down in the comments below and I'll try to answer them to the best of my capability. Thank you.